Hi, y'all, and welcome to the Final Deposition. This podcast is brought to you by the students of Widener University Commonwealth Law School. I'm your host for this episode, Jericha Brock, and our guest today is retired NFL tight end Brian Parker. Mr. Parker is now an associate at Goodspeed Merrill, practicing commercial litigation and employment law. We are also joined by his agent, Kevin Gold, with Pillar Audit. Alrighty, thank you so much, Brian, for joining us today. We're so excited to have you on. It's a pleasure to meet and speak with you today. To get us started, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Brian Parker. I'm living out in Denver, Colorado. Originally from Rochester, New York. Went to the University at Albany, where I was first connected to Kevin Gold here. After playing football for 15 years, including college, I had an opportunity to play in the NFL for about 5 calendar seasons. What that meant for me was I was on about 5 different teams. Had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of injuries, a lot of good and a lot of bad during that time, especially during the downs. Is when I kind of thought about what would be next for me in my career. And now I'm a lawyer. I graduated the University of Denver, Sturm College of Law in May of 2023. So since then, I've been a lawyer. So my life, for the most part, was football. And then in 2020, when I started law school, pivoted quite a bit. And now I've been a lawyer since then.
That's awesome. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be in your shoes one day. So let's go back to UAlbany. I believe that's where you and Kevin's connection kind of starts. So what was y'all's entry way into each other?
I think I probably got a Facebook message from you, Kevin, which at the time in 2013 or 14, whatever that was, when I was starting to get interest from the NFL, I probably had a few agents reach out to me, and I think that was fairly common back then. I don't know if you're still sliding into candidates or potential clients' Facebook inboxes.
It's DMs now.
It's
Yeah, we
DMs.
do DMs.
Yeah.
We've progressed
Okay,
to Twitter and Instagram DMs, but yes.
Yeah, so that's how that worked. I think I had dismissed 1 or 2 before, wasn't ready for that. And then Kevin told me he was an Albany grad, so I was able to connect with him there, and we met shortly thereafter, and got along well with each other, and started working with each other from there.
Great. I mean, and I think until the end of your career, maybe still right now, he's been your agent. So that was a great connection for the two of you then, I bet.
That's right. Yeah, Kevin's always advocated for me to continue playing football, and not a lot of the people I'm sure that you're around in law school, you give the same advice. But his main advice to me, at least, from in the time I was playing, when I told him I was thinking about being a lawyer, was the world needs more tight ends than it does lawyers.
Still true today.
So yeah, we went back and forth over that for a couple of years when I was thinking about becoming a lawyer, and ultimately here I am. But that's how we first met. That's how we got in touch. We speak here and there about law stuff, about Albany stuff, whatever's going on in the world. So it's been good having someone over there who's got my back, and also a friend.
That's sweet, actually. That's really sweet. So in 2015, you were signed as an undrafted free agent to the Chargers. What do you recall about that draft experience?
Yeah, that was a whirlwind. That was a whirlwind for me. Coming from Albany, I think at the time before I played, there were only, I believe, 2 players who had actually played in NFL games before me. I'm sure there were a handful that worked out and tried out, and maybe even made practice squads. But for me, it was a whirlwind. So the draft experience was one, seeing which combines, which pro days, which opportunities I had were actually available to me coming from an FCS school, and not being highly recruited out of Rochester from high school either. So we pretty much found the opportunities that were available and went from there. I did really well as far as my testing numbers in my pro day. I did a couple of regional combines, which were, I don't know if they're still around now, but those are available to to people who have a lot of interest from the NFL who aren't invited to the main NFL combine. So a lot of mixed feedback based on how things went with respect to where I would go in the draft. I think day one of the draft, I was getting calls from some coaches. Day two, day three, got more calls. Ultimately, did not get drafted. So what that meant for me is I had opportunities. I had, I think, 7 or 8 teams reach out, say, "Hey, we'll give you a little bit of money if you come play tight end with us." And of course, naturally, I chose San Diego, California to go out and play tight end, which I think when I committed to going out to San Diego, I may have been the 4th or 5th tight end. And then the next few days, they signed a handful more. And then I was starting camp. I think I was 7 out of 8 as far as depth chart with the tight ends. And then I ended up making it through a couple injuries right away and kind of clicked towards the end of camp where the team wanted me on the practice squad. And in order to be on the practice squad in the NFL, you have to first be cut off the at the time was a 90-man roster down to a 53-man roster. Was cut, and then in that interim period, you have to clear waivers. I didn't clear waivers. I was actually picked up by the Chiefs. They claimed me off the waiver wire. Remember, Kevin gave me a call probably 5-6 a.m. in the morning, Sunday morning, California time. And we were out having fun the night before, thinking, got through camp, let's celebrate. Some guys are going to make it, some guys aren't. And Kevin gave me a call and said, "Hey, you got a flight leaving in a few hours. Pack your bags." So from the first team I was on with the Chargers to the last team I was on, it was always a whirlwind, always up and down. But yeah, that's how it started and ended with the Chargers.
Yeah. And then, I mean, to my next point, my next question here, you kind of started with it. You were picked up by the Chiefs. So I think my understanding, based off of what I looked into, you spent your whole first season with the Chiefs, or that was your first complete season with the Chiefs. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I started week 1 with the Chiefs of the regular season. So I was on the roster week one, and I was on the roster through the whole year into the offseason the following year. And it was probably about a year later that I had a significant injury. But yeah, the first year I was show up, not knowing if I was going to make a team a couple days before, to thinking I was going to be on a practice squad, to all of a sudden being on a roster, knowing I'm going to get a real paycheck here soon, have an opportunity to play. I think it was about 7 or 8 weeks into the season that I was activated onto the roster of people who dress up for the games, and played my first game in London at Wembley Stadium and did really well blocking. And because I did really well blocking from the get-go, I was labeled as a blocking tight end for the rest of my career.
Okay. A blocking tight end. Can you fill us in on that title?
Well, number one, I was behind Travis Kelce, who at the time was, an up and coming rising star. Of course, really great leader, really great teammate. But because I had a guy like that in front of me, who was one of the best receiving tight ends of all time, my opportunities certainly were limited. Also, I blocked really well in college. So as a tight end, you're blocking and catching. If you're lucky, you get to do both. I did both in college. Certainly, you prepare that way every week in the NFL. But one of the strengths I had right out of the get-go was my ability to run block, and that's a big perk for a tight end in the NFL now. Always has been. It was 10 years ago when I was first playing. So they noticed that, made an immediate impact in their run blocking scheme. And then I had a spot going forward for the rest of the year and was able to suit up and play every game for the rest of the year.
That's nice. That's a great way to kind of put that together. I didn't know they had labels for tight ends like that. So I mean, you did touch on that just a little bit. So I did see that you experienced an injury in Kansas. If you're willing to share, what was that injury?
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was so it was the last preseason game of the 2016 preseason season. So that would have been Super Bowl 51 was the Super Bowl corresponding to that year. And I was most likely going to make the team. There was a chance I wasn't going to make the team, but they asked me to be the backup fullback for the last game. And there's a saying in the NFL, the more you could do. It's as simple as that. If you could do more, better chance you can make the team. So at that time, I wasn't going to say no and hinder my chances of making the team. I said, sure, I'll play fullback. I'm 6'4". I don't think a fullback's ever been 6'4", but let's do it and prove myself. So everything was going well. Had a couple of good catches that game, a few good blocks, and then I went shoulder to shoulder with the guy, and my arm died. And that's common in football. It's called the stinger. And that's what they told me. I said I had a stinger. It was a pretty bad stinger, but you'll be all right. So I wasn't able to shake it off like a lot of the times you could do with stingers. Instead, I sat out the rest of the game, got some X-rays, and they told me, well, it'll probably come back in a couple days. So at that point, we were going into creating the active rosters, or the teams were going into creating the active rosters over the next couple days. And they said, hey, listen, your shoulder's not better. We're gonna have to cut you, but you're probably gonna be fine in a couple days. If we give you some sort of injury settlement, which I'm sure Kevin could explain more how those work, you're gonna have to sit for a period of weeks with respect to how many weeks we pay you on the injury settlement. So I said, okay, what does that mean? They said, well, basically, just sign this injury waiver here, and you'll get picked up by a team, and you'll be fine. So Kevin and I spoke. Said, okay, well, the doctors are saying I'll be fine. Let's go ahead and sign this. So I signed the injury waiver. Sure enough, I get a call from the Jets within the next day or two, and they said, hey, I claim you off waivers here, sign you to our team. We need a tight end. Okay, great. So I tell Kevin, I said, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to pass this physical here. My arm doesn't work. So they flew me out to Florham Park, New Jersey, tried to pass physical, and because I couldn't raise my arm, of course, I couldn't pass the physical. So what that means is the Jets aren't going to sign me. Well, I had already signed my rights away to the Chiefs, so now I'm left here in the middle of nowhere. Chiefs don't want me because I'm hurt. The Jets don't want me because I'm hurt. What do? Well, the doctor said I'd be fine in a couple of days, so let's wait a few days. So I waited a couple of weeks, and then I saw another doctor, got a second opinion, and had some nerve studies done. And as my arm was not healing or getting back to normal, it obviously was a pretty serious injury. So what ultimately happened was my axillary nerve, which corresponds to your deltoid muscle, had been crushed and completely shut off. And without your deltoid muscle being turned on by the nerves, your arm basically doesn't work. I could use my hand, bend my elbow, but I couldn't move my arm. So that was a tough time, and I didn't really know what was going to happen. Kind of did a bunch of normal therapy, a bunch of holistic treatments, a lot of acupuncture, which was really, really helpful, and it ended up healing. But because I signed the injury waiver with the Chiefs, I wasn't able to sign, or I wasn't able to get any sort of compensation from the Chiefs, from another team until I was healthy. So that led us to the NFL's injury grievance process. And from what I remember is basically we filed a grievance, or went through the grievance dispute process with the NFL and said, hey, look, I'd be on a team right now. Clearly, other teams wanted me. The Chiefs only cut me after I was injured, and they told me I'd be fine. So ended up essentially suing the Chiefs, I guess, and settling for close to a full season there, and ended up getting a credited season because of that, an accrued season for purposes of contracts, and all that was great. Ended up sitting out, healing up, playing a few more years after that. But during that time of not knowing whether or not my arm was going to heal, and being on such a high for my first year as a rookie to such a low, I really got to experience what the NFL business is all about. And that was the time during which I first started thinking about what's next for me and becoming a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for sharing that. So Kevin, I mean, through that whole story, through that whole process, I mean, what was your role, or did you play a role at all as his agent?
I mean, that's I often say it's easy to be an agent when things are going well. It's a lot harder when things aren't going well. So we went from the highs of him being on an opening roster, and as an undrafted free agent, that's very difficult. Maybe 10% of undrafted free agents actually make it. So my role is to be the same whether things are going good or bad, which is to help your player navigate all the challenges of the NFL. And in this case, Brian is a good example of where an agent has to do and serve in the best interest of the client. And in this case, you never want to have to sue a team, but I have a client, a player who's not able to play, and the medical guidance that we were given we thought was incorrect. So, your role is to advise the player, hey, here's the pros and cons, here's the risks and benefits. In this case, you had to put the player's interest first and his long-term interest first by pursuing that grievance, and we were successful, and were able to get Brian paid, get him appropriate seasons for free agency and contract purposes, but more importantly, get him back on the field to perform his services for others. So it's tough. An agent plays a lot of roles. You're doing the contracts. You're helping them navigate the system. You're sometimes a psychologist, a psychiatrist at the same time, and just making sure that they can put their best foot forward in the NFL, which it stands for National Football League, but it also stands for not for long, and that it's a business that really, the average career is about 3.5 years. So you really have to maximize your time and effort in those 3.5 years, and you really need somebody looking out for not their own best interest, but the player's best interest.
No, that's very well said. And then Brian, back to you. So as you said, you played for a few teams, some longer than others, but through your career, what would you say was the most notable thing for you?
Well, that what I just explained was probably the most notable, because that was the biggest contrast in my life from such a high to such a low, and not having any control over that situation. So that was really difficult. But I learned a lot from it in a lot of ways. It's helped me. It helped me in law school. It helped me get into law school. It helped me with jobs after law school. It helped me get jobs after law school. So that, although it's been a really low point and teaching point and difficult point, that not many people go through such lows like that, after experience such a high, that I've really taken that with me in a lot of ways. There's been a lot of other teaching points in the NFL as well. Just being around different types of people from all different types of backgrounds, which is true to some extent growing up and playing sports. But I learned a lot of perspective from having friends from all different types of areas of the country, poor, rich, families together, families not together. There's a lot of teaching points there as well, but I wouldn't say those lessons are necessarily specific to the NFL more so than they are to football in general or sports in general.
Okay, okay. And then as far as, of course, the pressures as a professional athlete, one, I guess, I mean, it's kind of like a twofold question. Did you feel any of those pressures? And then if you did, how did you handle those pressures? And they could be anything, personal, from the team, just outside familial pressures. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean the pressure of performing at a really high level was more that was something I was more comfortable with. That was always the case with football. You strive for perfection. Um, a lot of that has carried over, into my life as a lawyer as well, as far as the being punctual, being on time, giving everything your best. That's definitely a big lesson I took with me. But some of the pressures, I guess, I looked at a lot of those as good. A lot of friends reaching out or family reaching out that you haven't heard of. There's pressures there. I was fortunate enough to not be in a situation like some other friends in the NFL where people asking for money all the time. I didn't really have those experiences, but certainly people coming out of the woodworks, acting like they're your best friend, and then I haven't talked to those people since the NFL, gives you a lot of perspective too on who's really close to you and who really just wants to be a part of this journey you're on. But I would say just showing up all the time. Football was it was never even my favorite sport. I was always a big basketball guy. So, it was definitely a job. There were parts of it that were, you know, fit the a dream come true narrative because, being around some people, having access to some things were a once in a lifetime experience. But when you're in it, you really just see it as a job and you see, man, my body hurts all the time. I need to prep for practice tomorrow. I need to make sure my third step on my route is perfect. So these little things that were always, a big part of the pressures of performing well were certainly there. But here, you never know if one mistake is going to be the mistake that gets you cut. For me, I really think, the times I were cut from teams were more so due to injuries, either directly related to me or indirectly with other positions on the team. But that's just part of the business. So the biggest pressure, other than the one I described earlier, not knowing if I was going to play football again, was just every day just giving it your best 100%, because everyone's giving it 100%, and sometimes 100% isn't good enough. So that was stressful, because you might have a great practice, you might think things go well, and then you go watch the film and you realize they didn't go perfectly. So that was tough, but again, I was used to that to some extent, and a lot of those experiences have been good teaching points moving forward.
No, that's I mean, that's any pressure is difficult. It sounds like you handled it well. I mean, for the most part. I would say you strongly pivoted. Especially speaking, so like you officially retired in 2019. I know you talked about like during that low after that injury, you considered what that next step might be, but after your retirement officially, what made you want to sit down and take the LSAT? I don't know if I would want to do
Yeah, yeah,
that, by the
actually, so
way.
I think I took the LSAT before I retired.
Okay.
I took the LSAT, I think probably either a year or 2 years before I was officially retired, and then I took it again the following year. So it was something I was thinking about for a while. I had always thought about being a lawyer as a kid in the back of my mind. Kind of fit my personality well. Something I thought would be a good challenge, but never really considered it because football was always the front runner. So when I had that experience with the Chiefs and actually had to deal with being, I guess, what's most similar to being a plaintiff in a lawsuit, I was really in a position where, man, I really got screwed over here. And the only way there could be some sort of justice here is if we pursue this thing. So having to go through that and experience it myself was a big part of it. Um, During that time, I was also around another attorney in Rochester quite a bit who owned a personal injury firm. So I got to hear and experience his side of things as well, and I thought it was really interesting. The other part of it was the stability. That was something I never had with football. You could make a lot of money in a short period of time, and then one day the rug could be pulled up from under you without having any control over that. So, having the passion to do something to help others, facing a challenge or an experience similar to what I faced was a big part of it. The rigor of the career and the way it kind of I think fits my personality was another big part of it. And then of course, the long term stability. And one thing I didn't realize, which I'm really appreciative of now, is how much you learn in so many things, not just about the law or how to litigate. I'm a litigator now, but just how you approach everyday situations with friends or family or other situations in which there are problems to be solved. I think it really helps me long term as far as how I approach situations and what's really stressful and what's not really stressful and what's a simple problem versus what's a complicated problem. When you confront a situation that you might not be able to fix, and how you handle those situations as well. So all those things are really has what previously drove me to be a lawyer, what has helped me stay here. Um, because not every day is fun. Not every day is sexy like it is being in the NFL, getting all those perks. So, all those things are a big part of why I am where I am today.
Hmm. And then so you mentioned where you got your legal education from. I'm just going to say it again: the University of Denver, Sturm College of Law.
Yeah, it
What was that legal education like for you?
was good. It was my first year was during COVID, so it was quite a bit different. I really enjoyed law school. I mean, coming from the NFL to only having to commit to 3 hours a day of classes, where you get a lot of flexibility to get your work done sometimes, get your work done other times, hang out, work out. I really like that part of law school. I also liked being around a totally different set of people that I was in football. Obviously, there are lots of different people with lots of different background and interests in football. But being around people who chose to go to law school was also very different. One thing I really liked about uh, DU was that they offer a lot of opportunities to work internships and externships. So my 1L a year, I was working for a solo practice employment law firm. I worked there for about a year. I worked in a civil litigation clinic, got experience my second year. And then my third year, I joined the firm I'm still with now, about 4 years later. Um, so I got a lot of hands-on experience. I think maybe only 2/3 of my credits were classroom-based credits, where then another third were, actually getting to work in a law firm as a law clerk, getting to do little trials for people who are in need under the supervision of another lawyer, through similar to what's like a student practice act out here. So law school was great. Law school was really good. COVID for a lot of people was obviously a really tough time. For me, it was the year in between the NFL and law school where I really got to, get my next step together. I bought a house, and made a lot of new friends, and here I'm still friends with a lot of them today. And so I miss law school. Law school was a lot of fun. I really
Oh
enjoyed law
gosh.
school. Yeah.
I mean, I
I also had the experience, like I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends. It was extremely stressful for a lot of my friends. After having been through the NFL, it was a lot less stressful. So the perspective I had was obviously very different than a very large majority of people. I have found that other people have had careers, 3, 5, 10-year careers, even 1 or 2 years before law school, had similar perspectives. Clearly not the NFL, but doing something else before law school is something I always recommend to other people, because one, it gives you a little more time to think about it if that's what you really want to do, but two, it gives you a little more perspective. You get to work for a little bit, where then you get to law school. You could really zoom in on what is critical, what is really important, and where you could probably avoid situations where you might burn yourself out.
oh gosh. Okay. So word of advice for my next life: be a man, play in the NFL first, and then go to law school.
Yeah,
No
that's
Pretty
the
much, yeah,
chance.
that's,
Yeah.
that's
that's the
exactly it.
checklist.
Dang it. We're a women professional
There you go.
football league.
That's right.
Um,
Flag. Yep.
flag. There we go. So I mean, you were kind of talking about it a little bit, but if you could like hone in just a touch. I mean, granted, I know your first year was during COVID, but to that point, I mean, like you were a professional athlete for 4 years. If my math is correct, you hadn't been in a formal classroom for 6 years before you went to law school. So what was that like to have to sit down? Granted, you said 2/3 or at least a third was more in practice, but what was that other 2/3 like, having to sit in like contracts or like torts for
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
2 months?
contracts for sure. I hated cold calling. I feel like I'm pretty good with public speaking. I don't normally get nervous in a courtroom. Um, Done a handful of depositions. A lot of situations where I could get nervous, but being cold called was one of the most nerve-wracking things for me.
It's pretty scary.
And
Yeah.
and you mentioned contracts, and one of the greatest professors I had was my contract professor at DU, but she was intense. And I don't know if it was more or less intense, but for me it felt more intense because my first year we would be in this hybrid model where we're in class in person. The 1Ls got to go in person. Um, a third of the week essentially. So Monday, Tuesdays I was in person. The rest of the week I'd be in Zoom. And being called out on Zoom when there's 60 people on your screen and you see your professor lean into the camera and call your name out, that was almost worse than being cold called in class. So for me, trying to learn how to prepare for a class where a professor cold calls was difficult because at the time, not having been in school for 6 years, I'm like, okay, I need to memorize every single fact and every single word in this case. And that really didn't get me anywhere. But that was just something I learned over time, to kind of see the big picture and have a good understanding of what's going on and not burn myself out with trying to read the same case 5 times to be prepared for a class, and really, hone in on what's important in those cases. So I liked it. I liked being around people. I liked being, you know, being on the same team as people in a sense for classes. Hey, we got these assignments. Let's talk about them, and let's also get to know each other a little bit. So I liked that part of law school a lot, even though the cold calling was not my favorite part.
Yeah, preparation is definitely a delicate balance and something only you can learn for yourself as far as how you're going to prepare for class. But I mean, your agent here, of course, he has to be a lawyer. So how did you communicate with Kevin at all during those 3 years of law school? Was he a help at all?
I don't remember. All I remember is Kevin saying, "Hey, sure, you don't want to go to the Bills."
I still got calls for him, even when he was in law school. NFL teams were still calling, and that was my line. We need more tight ends than we do lawyers.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
Brian's the exception. We probably need more Brian Parkers as lawyers than. But
Yeah, no, I think there was one specific instant during probably my first fall, where there was maybe a team that was like, "Hey, no, we want to work Brian out. We'd seriously consider calling him." And it might have even been the Bills. I grew up in Rochester, so I was a Bills fan. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Oh yeah, if the Bills call, maybe I'll go give them a chance." But at that point, I had started law school, and I didn't want to be in a very realistic, impossible situation where I have to drop out of law school, miss a few weeks of classes, and then get cut and have to wait another year to start over. In the grand scheme of things, maybe who knows what it would have changed. But at that point, I was kind of over. I was kind of over it and ready to, get through law school and, learn how to become a lawyer and all that. But yeah, we were in touch. We were in touch a bunch. We've been in touch since then. I think might have done. I think you were local counsel for us in the case out there.
had a business relationship too.
Okay.
Yeah, crazy.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we did some of that. We touched base on a lot of the Albany stuff. Some of his clients here and there. What's going on with our alma mater? So yeah, it's pretty simple to check in and see what's going on. Talk about our careers, our futures, all that.
I thought of something. What did you tell other classmates about what you did before law school? Did you mention you were an NFL player?
That's funny.
Does that come up?
I like to think I'm pretty humble when it comes to that stuff, but sometimes I felt like I was too humble, where people would think I'm being ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, I worked before law school, so I think a lot of the time people would say, oh, so you've been in Denver for 6 or 7 years before law school, 5 years, whatever it was back then. Oh yeah, I had a job that brought me out here. So sometimes that was it, and other times like, oh, what'd you do? Oh, I played football, and they'd be like, oh, like college, like arena football. Like, come on, like, do I not look like I could play
the
football?
big league,
Not
y'all.
anymore.
It's the big league, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
5 years ago,
The
I still
shield.
looked
Yeah.
good. So yeah, that was funny, and I still tend to do that sometimes. Some of it is because I don't necessarily want to go. I don't want to see people shift gears, like they have no interest in me until they do have interest in me. But I definitely use that to my advantage too, when I need to.
Pull the NFL card. Yep.
Yeah, I pulled the NFL card. Yeah, I think something we talked about recently is my resume. Before I went to law school, I didn't have a resume. So half my resume was my experience, what I was doing as a tight end on different teams, and now it's kind of lumped all into professional athlete for the 4 or 5 years I was playing football. But yeah, it's quite the conversation starter. When I'm mingling with other attorneys, sometimes I don't want to bring it up. But then if I'm mingling with other attorneys and all they're doing is talking about how great they are and they don't want to listen to anything I want to say, then maybe I'll use it to my advantage to get their attention a little bit. But
So it's the
Only
strategic use of the NFL card. You use it strategically.
Exactly. It's evolved. I used to try and avoid it at all costs, especially because NFL players avoid it a lot. Especially when you're playing in the NFL. Like, understandably, you don't want to be telling everyone in public that you play football. But a lot of the times, the guys in the NFL, oh, do you play sports? Because you're looking at a 6'6" guy. You
Yeah.
play sports? Oh yeah, I play water polo. And it's like, all right, being super nice to the guy. Like we could be a little honest in that. So it's a little bit of the background of keeping that a little more isolated, and also now, yeah, evolving to use it more strategically when I need to.
hmm Kevin, quick question for you. I mean, so you've been around lawyers for a very long time, but how does it feel to have, of I don't know, I still haven't got a grasp on it if it's still current or slash former agent, client agent, but how does it feel to have like one of your athletes now be a lawyer, now kind of like being able to use you?
I love it. It's my first client who became an attorney. A lot
hmm
of my clients have been very successful off the field, and it's funny because I look at my agent relationship. I often tell players there are a lot of agents you can sign with, and it's going to be a purely transactional relationship, meaning they're going to represent you for your 3 or 5 years, and then the relationship is going to end. The way I preach it to my clients, and what I look for in clients, is more of a long-term relationship. It's like we're getting married here, so
hmm
yeah, you're going to judge me for how I do those 3 or 5 years, but you're going to really judge me how are you doing 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So I kind of view all of my clients almost as your children. And so to see one become successful in a field of law, even though I told him we need more tight ends and
hmm
lawyers, I mean, it's an incredible feeling. And then being able to work with him together a few years ago, where my firm's serving as local counsel to his client, and I have to email him about legal stuff. It is heartwarming. It's great to see. I love to see my clients successful on the field, and then for their careers thereafter, and to see Brian flourishing, and it's an incredible feeling.
That's good. That's good. That's great. It sounds very rewarding. I mean, to be in that position, both for them on and off the field.
Correct.
So, Brian, if you could touch at all to give any like positive advice or words of motivation to students that are considering or maybe like I don't know, yeah, just considering going into law school after they have it, right? After they've been in other careers, and then now they're making the choice to pursue a legal education.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That my first piece of advice is usually really make sure you want to go to law school. And if that means talk to some lawyers, talk to some people who maybe have left the practice of law, and some people who really love the practice of law, that's a good way to start. I do think that doing something else for a couple of years or more is another great way to have a good idea of, is this what I really want to do? In addition to, it helps you make a little extra money, which I think is also helpful when you get to law school. A lot of people take out loans, which is great if they have the opportunity to do that. But I've seen people kind of struggle with those thereafter too when you have a good lawyer job. And unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of the beast of education right now. But not only would having another job or brief career period before law school help you with perspective, but it also help you financially a little bit, maybe have some money to get through law school where you're not digging a huge hole for yourself. Those are big, but really it's the same advice. It's really just know what you want to do to the extent you can, because you don't really always know. And there are certainly days now where I'm like, oh gosh, why did I become a lawyer? Why couldn't I just stuck it out and try to play football? And then there are other days where it's like, man, I'm so happy I'm not doing that anymore, being on my body anymore like that. So it really depends on the situation, but I think talking to people and really, getting other people's perspective too is really helpful. So if you know lawyers or don't know lawyers, reaching out to someone who has either been a lawyer for a long time, short period of time, left the practice of law, whatever, any perspective or insight into their experiences will only help shape future lawyers and potential law students, I think.
hmm So that sounds like great advice. I mean, I didn't take that advice. I hopped right into it. But I mean, especially for those that are considering it, it sounds very useful information. Um, and then, of course, talking about your professional career, is there anything um, specific or just like unique to the fact that you're a professional athlete that you're able to use now, like in your career as a lawyer?
I think I have a lot. I have a lot of confidence now because of that. I know I've done some really difficult things. I've been in some really high pressure situations. Um, so I think it gives me a lot of perspective on that end. I still think preparation is huge at this level as a lawyer, just like it was in the NFL. Being over prepared, which when you have billable clients, sometimes there's a fine line, and how do I over prepare and actually, I have a paying client. So that's something I think lawyers are always learning. But really, being prepared in every way, especially in litigation. I do commercial litigation and some employment law litigation. So some of these disputes could get really messy, and you never really know. You could be, no matter how prepared you are, there's always going to be something that comes up that you weren't expecting. So really, just preparation and time management, which again, football helps a lot of people because if you can't be on time, if you're not prepared, you're not going to make the NFL, let alone make it to a high level of college sports. So all those things that are really helpful and important in football are also helpful as an attorney now too.
No, that's good to know. Again, still missing out on that football career for myself. So I mean, you talked just right now about your areas of focus being in commercial litigation and employment law. So, as in those fields of law, what does your day to day look like outside of the preparation that we were just talking about? But what does your day to day look like on this Monday and
Yeah, it
Monday
depends. I mean, one of the great things about my job here with Goodspeed Merrill, and one of my colleagues here who's been a lawyer for 30 plus years, he says one of the greatest things about being a lawyer is it's not a 9 to 5, and one of the worst things about being a lawyer is it's not a 9 to 5. So my days change. There are certainly days where I'm out of bed working at the crack of dawn and I'm up till midnight, or later prepping. And then there are other days where, I might be able to jump on a podcast like this, or I might be able to get coffee with someone and not worry about how it's going to impact my day. I've been here for a few years, so part of that, I think it's probably true with most jobs, hopefully, where you kind of earn that level of trust with people, or you don't have people hovering over and micromanaging you. But your work product speaks for itself, and if your normal way of doing things might be different than the normal 9 to 5 employee, which obviously works great for some people. For me, sometimes it means I'm working weekends. Sometimes it means I, might be able to cut out early towards the end of the week. So my days change. But as far as like the substance of what I'm doing, all different types of disputes in commercial litigation. So small contracts disputes to big contracts disputes. A lot of construction things come up. A lot of land disputes come up, especially out in Colorado. There's a lot of easement, adverse possession, all those fun things in law school that actually are I find pretty enjoyable out here when you get to know someone and get to see how um, inspired they are by their history with their 100 acres, and now you're dealing with a dispute about a fence, but it really means a lot to them, and you could put real world perspective into maybe some case law that isn't as interesting when you're reading it in law school in a property class.
Yeah.
Same with the employment law stuff. I mean, the employment law stuff, we do both sides. I tend to like the plaintiff side better, especially because it's somewhat similar to what I explained to you earlier when I was a chief, and then I wasn't a Kansas City chief anymore, and then I felt as if I had been wronged by them, so we kind of pursued the grievance, and I could relate to them a lot. I've also been deposed in a workers' comp case where I was trying to get a workers' comp benefit, and I have that experience as well. So not a lot of lawyers have actually been deposed. Hopefully not for what they do as a lawyer. But a lot of times I could relate to clients when I talk about just giving the truth, just being calm, just telling your side of the story. So it's all over the place, and that's one of the things I like about commercial litigation and employment law. It's so broad, and we touch on so many different things where it's probably going to be tough to be an expert on all of those things, but I'm learning about so many different things that There's a lot of overlap in the procedures and how you handle things, settlement discussions, tough client discussions, discussions with opposing counsel who are easy to talk to, discussions with opposing counsel who aren't easy to talk to or don't want to talk to you at all. So it's all over the place, and I like the variety. It keeps you on your toes.
No, I mean that does sound very different. Different than what I was expecting. Um, um, but briefly there at the end, you were just talking about how you're able to utilize your experience on the plaintiff side when it comes to employment matters. I read in your bio on your company website that you mentioned how you wanted to be an advocate for other people, especially because of your past experience. How, in your position right now, or are you able to be that voice for people that are going through those similar situations?
Yeah, no, I think I kind of touched on it a little bit where, I could explain to them that I've been in a similar situation where I have been wrongfully terminated, or I've been in a situation where, man, this feels like this is going on forever and I just want to get it over with. So being able to share bits and pieces of my story, or not, I don't want to make it all about me, but, I give them a little and let them know that I'm able to put myself in their shoes at least to some extent on things, and hear them. I think helps a lot with clients. Know that I care for what they're going through. I understand what they're going through, and I appreciate the difficulties of having to do this. And also sometimes you have to have conversations with, hey, like, we might fight this thing out for another year or two, and you might get a lot more money, or you might get a lot less money, but it's important to know that we may have to proceed for a lot more time, a lot more stress, and there is a real benefit as far as taking X amount of dollars, or settling, and really being more than, oh, here's the numbers, let's go for this, but really explaining to them like the impact on their life for making a decision to settle a case on either side, really.
Hmm. No, that's great. Um, Now, Kevin here is sports agent. And a criteria of that is you have to be a lawyer. And as a former professional athlete, have you considered at all becoming a sports agent?
I thought about it. I think I talked to Kevin about it a few years ago, maybe, and I think, Kevin, you were telling me that there's a ton of new requirements, financial requirements, time requirements, meeting requirements.
Yeah.
That I think at the time when you told me that kind of turned me off to it at least a few years ago. I think maybe there are some high fees that you mentioned.
Yep. A lot of fees.
What?
You gotta negotiate one contract at least every 3 years in the NFL to remain active before they'll even take your fees, pass an exam. So yeah, the NFL in particular has made it much more stringent.
Yeah, so it's always in the back of my mind.
Mhm.
I'm not. I think it's possible that I go down that road one day, but at least where I'm at right now, I want to keep perfecting the craft and figuring out how to be a lawyer.
Mhm.
I think it'd be a difficult jump for me to make right now to not have any clients, pay those fees, have those responsibilities and requirements without knowing whether or not it's going to work out. And I know that's kind of a leap of faith any agent would need to take at any point in their career, but that part of it has kind of turned me off, at least for the time being.
Mhm. Okay. And the last point I just want to make, or just kind of ask you about, is kind of like bring the 2 points of your career together. Earlier, I asked about the pressures of being a professional athlete. I'm just curious to know if you feel any similar pressures with being a lawyer, and if at all you feel that one kind of outweighs the other as far as on your
Yeah,
mental or however.
yeah. I mean, it's a good question because I think some pressures are stronger than others. As far as there are some things in the practice of law that are harder to deal with than they were in the NFL, and vice versa. I think the two big things in the NFL are, one, not knowing if your best is going to be able to get you, save you your job tomorrow, and two, not knowing if I'm going to go out there and have a concussion or break a bone, or do something that I have no control over or might have control over. And those are the two biggest ones from the NFL. As far as being a lawyer, it's if you're before a judge or if you have a lot of things due at the same time, those are stressful. Thinking, how the heck am I going to get all these things done with so little time? Assuming you can't push things forward, that gets really stressful. Managing 20 to 30 cases at a time is difficult and keeps you up at night a lot. Where I'm thinking about, what am I going to put in my email tomorrow? What is this case says this? How am I going to fit this square peg into a round hole here? Those things weigh on you too, and those things keep me up at night a lot. I've been getting better at it, but really, it's just staying on top of everything. And being a couple years in now, I've been feeling like I'm hitting that stride a little more, where some of those things aren't as don't feel like they're as much pressure or as significant of like a burden on my health and life. But part of that is honestly, I think, just kind of the nature of the beast here with becoming a lawyer. Some things a lot of lawyers have to go through early in their career and figure out how to manage those types of pressures. So I think it's different, but I think there are there are a lot of pressures as a lawyer that some of them I'm getting better with handling, and others are probably always just going to be there no matter how experienced I am.
No, I mean, I understand that. I don't expect really the legal field to get any nicer to me as we continue in it. But thank you for answering that question. Much appreciated. That's all I necessarily have prepared. Kevin, did you have any other
No,
questions?
again, it's an honor and a thrill to see Brian beat the odds. He beat the odds going from Albany to the NFL. I even tell my class, since we both went to Albany, it is a long way from the University at Albany to the NFL in any capacity. So it's great to see Brian succeed in that. It's great to see him not follow my advice and decide to go to law school and be such an exceptional young lawyer. And Brian, I still use you in my class, in my sports law class. There's two Brian Parker examples. One talks about your grievance and how it's important as an agent or an attorney to put your best interest of your clients first. And so pursuing a claim against the Chiefs, maybe that burns a bridge for me against the Chiefs, but the Chiefs aren't my client. You're my client. It's about doing what's in the best interest of your client. So I use your claim, that workers' comp claim, and kind of the dilemma as one of my examples. And then I use you, I think, in a humorous way. But if you remember when you applied to the bar, to take the bar in Colorado, and probably in every state, you have to literally disclose every single employee you had and who your supervisor is. And that's maybe easier if you worked at Red Lobster and you worked at Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. Well, in Brian's case, he had about 7, 8 different NFL teams. And we had to track down, okay, what team were you working with there, and who is the who's your supervisor? Is it the general manager? Is it the position coach? And so I show my class that bar application question that you had, and then I show your work history, which is not a traditional work history. It's the Chargers and the Chiefs and the Jets and the Saints and the Broncos, and so I also use your career in a humorous way as well. So, but it is an honor to see you be so successful. Most people only get to be a professional really in one thing. So the fact that you've been able to be a professional in two is just a testament to your intelligence and your work ethic. And I'm happy to have been a part of that with you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Let me ask you a question. Have you had any clients play for the Chiefs since me?
I have not, but that's purely coincidental.
Okay. So
circumstantial evidence.
Okay, circumstantial. Okay. We'll revisit that.
When we get direct evidence, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We might need to talk to them.
Yeah, we'll see.
And I can attest to that. He only ever talks about you in class in a very positive way.
Yes.
Yes, that only positive things to say about you. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us on the Final Deposition today. It was a pleasure to have you on. We can't wait to see what else your career holds. And thank you again.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.